the characteristics of highly successful teams are people who operate at the intersection of kind, smart, and passionate, which is effectively the intersection of like teamwork, hard work, and smart work. If you, as someone who is just entering the workforce, if you can convey that like you can be passionate about what you're doing and the company and the subject matter, if you can think, critically and be very smart and intentional about what you are doing, and be someone who people enjoy working with, like those are things that will accelerate your career like exponentially.
Welcome to the Worthy for 30 podcast. I am your host, Eric Tash. Join us as we delve into the world of impactful business leaders who are setting the bar high. Worthy for 30 carefully curates its guests, engaging with business trailblazers who embody the ethos of doing good while doing well. In each episode, we extract actionable tips and wisdom from these visionaries, offering you a blueprint to merge success with social impact. Ready to elevate your business game? Let's dive in and learn how to do good while thriving. Worthy for 30, where purpose meets profit. Welcome back to another episode and conversation here on the Worthy for 30 podcast. I'm your host, Eric Tash. With me today is, and I'm grinning ear to ear. And the reason why I'm grinning ear to ear because of this person's on my podcast is because he has inspired me with some of the questions that I ask my guests. And we'll dig into that. But with no further ado, Jason Schulweis, the CCO of the Female Quotient, he will explain his role and responsibilities, his career path. Right now I'm wearing an Indiana University hat. Jason went to a rival Big Ten school at the University of Michigan. So we have that in common. And also what's going to be very interesting, again, the premise of the Worthy for 30 podcast is talking to business leaders who are doing good while doing well. And Jason, throughout his career, has really and continues to have a mission-focused mindset as he grows and leads teams. We'll dig into that. So, Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. It's really a pleasure, and I'm so happy we're finally doing this.
Yes, I know it's been a while in the making. I'm really appreciative that you are able to join us today. For the audience, and I just want to start here. When you and I caught up about, I think it was like a month or 2 months ago, we were talking about connecting dots, and that's one of my favorite questions. And I think, again, as someone who likes to absorb, what my colleagues are doing in the workplace and within life, connecting dots is really, something that I like to ask guests who come on the show. And where I got that, again, is from Jason's LinkedIn profile, which I'll include a link. He's a proud and prolific dot connector. But what was interesting, Jason, was let's tell the audience a story, right? Let's bring everybody back to May 2008 when you were graduating college and talking about connecting dots. And those dots, again, in isolation may cause people apprehension, anxiety, rumination. But those dots, again, as you eloquently described, as you connect them, you see a much bigger picture. And as Steve Jobs said, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. You can't connect them looking forward. So let's start there. May 2008. What is going through your mind as you're about to graduate college?
It was definitely scary. 2008 was not a great time to enter the workforce. But to that end, and to kind of like finish the thought too around connecting dots, it's in the moment, it's really about collecting dots. And I think that's really where you have to be comfortable, collecting dots, which are people, experiences, that ultimately, down the road, again, to the Steve Jobs, quote, and what you and I have talked about as well. It's like, only after you have collected these things can you actually figure out the different ways in which they are connected, in the different ways that you can actually connect them, and what that can really do for you moving forward. And for me, graduating was interesting because there were already a lot of dots that I was collecting at Michigan. There were, kind of like the in-classroom dots. I double majored in psych and poli-sci. And those are really interesting. I think that taught me kind of like how people think and how to write and speak persuasively. But the kind of the extra credit dots that I was collecting too was in, being very active in the kind of like the social scene and actually running a very large event and party at the University of Michigan called Splash Bash, which it's funny because that taught me how to market an event, how to sell tickets, how to procure sponsorships, how to do a lot of things, which ultimately, now like you fast forward, that's really what I've done throughout my career, is working in media marketing and advertising. And so while, the kind of like the in-class dots definitely helped, I think what I learned out of the classroom is definitely the thing that I think I figured out how to start to connect a little bit faster. And for me was, it has been just a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. And, just continuing on that thought. So, again, you're, in class, outside of class, you're collecting and connecting these dots, as you look back, those early aughts of your soon to be professional career have led you to where you are today. But tell us a story though, because like 2008, spring 2008, that's like the heart of the financial crisis, right? So as a soon to be college grad, it must have been nerve wracking.
It was very nerve wracking. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I could do. And I was fortunate enough to, have a friend who, knew someone who knew someone, at the advertising agency Deep Focus. And they had an open internship that I went and applied for, which was, again, I knew nothing about digital advertising. Like I remember in my first week being taught what like a 300 by 250 was, and just like how the process works and all those sorts of things. And like, even honestly, how to use PowerPoint. Like those are just things that I didn't really do, in college. And it's, from a story perspective, it's very interesting because I fell in love with what I was doing. I thought it was just super fascinating to me. And I think being a elder millennial, or a, geriatric millennial, as we're so affectionately called, I have this, an appreciation and an experience with non-digital things. But I'm also very well versed, and, in the in all things kind of, digital and tech. And so I really loved it. And there was such a fun kind of like people component to everything that I was doing as well. And I'm like an extreme extrovert. So I loved that part. And one of the companies that we worked with really often from a publisher perspective, like a lot of the clients that I worked on, for HBO and AMC, like we worked with Yahoo a lot, and we worked with Thrillist a lot. And so I got to know the kind of like the sales teams in both places. And the place that I went actually after, Deep Focus was Yahoo. And I loved it there. I got to learn how to be an account manager. I got to bring a lot of the social and digital thinking that we had been playing around with at Deep Focus into Yahoo, and help kind of like push and evolve how the way that like Yahoo is thinking about social, beyond Yahoo Groups and Yahoo Answers and Yahoo Mail. And, as a result of doing that, was one of the first internal hires onto the first social solutions team at Yahoo, which came about after Yahoo acquired Citizen Sports. And, that was an amazing experience, and kind of like through that got experience outside of just account management and more like in integrated marketing and sales. And then moved on to a different team inside of Yahoo that was really focused on the biggest, most strategic partnerships and how we take a lot of very big, complex things and make it simple, and have that like roll up into one kind of like a big idea. I had kept in touch, with, some of the sellers and leadership at at Thrillist. And so after 3.5 years at Yahoo, I started talking to the Thrillist team and went over there to help start their sales marketing department, which was phenomenal, and I loved that. And one of the things that I was kind of like, doing outside of, and this kind of like goes back to the dots, the collecting dots, and like what you're supposed to be doing and what your outside of work is. In addition to loving like the sales marketing and integrated marketing components, I was going to probably like 2 or 3 live shows a week. I mean, live music was such a big part of my life. And now, with 2 kids, it's a little less so, but we'll get back there at some point. But live music was something that was so interesting and a passion point for me, where when I had first joined Thrillist, like going out to restaurants and bars and stuff I loved, and that was like, it was so core to what Thrillist was. And then as like I evolved, I think as a person and started to go to more to live music, I think I was kind of craving and also like a different professional experience too. I had applied to a job at Live Nation, and got a job at Live Nation, and was there for 2.5 years. I absolutely loved that experience. It was phenomenal. And, I think again, as I started to think about like my career and my life and how I wanted to evolve a little bit, I kind of wanted an MBA experience without going to get an MBA. And there are a few companies where you can really do that. One of which is a more management consulting firm. But I did not have the let's call it like either the finance experience or the grades in the right classes to really do that. But what I did have at that point, was like a decade of media experience. And so I applied to a job at MediaLink. And, for me, that was such an incredible like MBA with a focus on the media industry, where you really understand the different sorts of like power dynamics and everything that goes on. And you also learned how to evaluate, I think, leaders and companies. And it was through that experience that Morning Brew got put on my radar. And so I got connected to Alex Lieberman, and we had, we had a few conversations, and I went there. I was the 15th employee, helped grow the revenue for 3.5 years through the acquisition, which was, again, kind of a phenomenal experience. And as, as newsletters were really starting to rise, and become a really powerful content tool. After 3.5 years, went to Mind Body Green for a year as their CRO. Again, phenomenal experience, really like understanding how, the health and wellness market is evolving, understanding how, content and commerce like really do play off of each other when you can build a brand to the degree that you can actually launch products. Really phenomenal experience. And then all of that, from there, I've been now at Female Quotient for 4 months, and I can truly say I am where I'm supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. And why do you say you are where you're supposed to be? Like what is the mission of the Female Quotient that makes it such a special place?
Yeah. So the mission is to advance gender equality in the workplace and close the pay gap. And, one of the ways that we do that is by profiling and spotlighting remarkable women, to raise their profile. And when profiles are raised in that way, the pay raises, there are promotions, there is like, it really helps, from a cycle for good, perspective. And it was such a, it was I feel like it was the universe, I think, putting this opportunity in front of me, where, I've known, the founder and CEO Shelly for a while. Same with the president, Talia. Talia's my boss. And I started talking to them as my time at Mind Body Green was winding down. And one of the things that is such an amazing opportunity for Female Quotient is to take everything that we have been doing with the Equality Lounge at, CES and Davos and South by and Cannes and ANA and Advertising Week. And how do you, turn a lot of that sort of content and those themes into some things that are evergreen and things that are omni-channel. And we have 5 million followers across all of our socials that are very highly engaged. And so we have all of the things that you need to be a successful media company. And, they saw that as a really big opportunity. That happens to be like exactly what my professional experience entails, is working at a lot of media companies, launching media teams and organizations and products. And I've worked at companies that do digital, that do content, that do events. And so I understood the world and the need and, what the opportunity is. But what made it, even extra special is that, gender equality has been something that is very core to my own beliefs for as long as I can remember. My wife works in the industry, and, I have a daughter who's, almost 3.5. And there is no greater excitement or motivation in the world to me than to do something that can have a positive impact for them.
Wow. So it's really the nexus of the Venn diagram, where it's your professional aspiration, your growth, along with personal mission, you meet, which is extraordinary. And before we get back to the Female Quotient, what's super interesting about your career path, Jason, is that through line that, and hopefully the listeners are really taking away, at least this is my takeaway, is that, build your relationships, of course, build your knowledge base, build your relationships. You never know where that relationship is going to lead you, which is just absolutely tremendous. And you're able to also have the ability to see forward, yes, in the moment, but also seeing forward. Okay, I'm here. These are the skills that I'm acquiring. Here are the relationships that I'm building. I'm also keeping, my eyes, also, on other developing opportunities that may come to roost, which is great, because then you're able to again leverage and parlay that experience in those relationships into your next opportunity.
It's so true, and it's like I should actually draw this out at some point because I talked about the two of the companies that I worked with when I was at Deep Focus. When I got to Thrillist, before I went to Live Nation, one of the companies that I got a lot of exposure to was MediaLink at Thrillist, because Thrillist was a MediaLink client. And I remember being in the room with those consultants being like, oh my God, this is really cool. If I ever were to be a consultant, like this is the type of consulting that I would want to do. It's also the only type of consulting that I was qualified to do. And Live Nation was also a client. And so I had that exposure throughout. Then when I got to MediaLink, yes, because I was always looking for what's cool and what's next, did I, also find Morning Brew. But in going to CES and Cannes with MediaLink, I also got to go to all of the equality lounges that the Female Quotient was throwing. And what's also very interesting is that's when I've been involved with the UJA in New York for a very long time. Michael Casson is also very involved, and Shelley Zales is also very involved. And so, these are names and people and organizations that had been in my ether, or, my ecosystem for a long time. And it's just kind of funny that there are these through lines that go across multiple experiences and then come back in a very big way where, that I had exposure to these companies. I kind of got inspired and was able to figure out how to get to those companies in a more meaningful way over time.
Mm-hmm. No, it's very true, and again, I think this is definitely a LinkedIn post in the offing, a future LinkedIn post, to really draw this out. But what is your advice? Based on your experiences, again, looking back on the dots that you've connected, what is your advice to that, whether it's that soon to be, or that recent graduate, or that person who's just trying to figure out, okay, how do I grow within my career? What advice do you have for them?
I feel like I have so much. I'll try to distill it to a few things. One thing that I actually has become clearer to me over time, and now what I'm very proactive in sharing with my team and with companies is like the type of person that I look to hire and the type of teams that I like to build. The characteristics of highly successful teams are people who operate at the intersection of kind, smart, and passionate, which is effectively the intersection of like teamwork, hard work, and smart work. It's like if you, as someone who is just entering the workforce, if you can convey that like you can be passionate about what you're doing and the company and the subject matter, if you can think, critically and be very smart and intentional about what you are doing and be someone who people enjoy working with, like those are things that will accelerate your career like exponentially, because it's very easy to do like two of those three. But if you can do three of three, and it doesn't take that much, to do those types of things, I think it it really does matter. And, for me, I don't, I don't take for granted that being extremely extroverted and social was beneficial to my career. I recognize like the world is different now, that like, especially, over the last couple of years, that things, things are just different. But, for me, being out there and going to meetings and going to events and doing all that kind of stuff where you can really build your network, and people know you. And that's why I post like a lot on LinkedIn, is I have a lot to say, but there is also a lot of value in sharing thoughts, and getting your name out there and the way that you think and the way that you write. Um, so many companies, and Female Quotient included, a lot of what we offer is, executive visibility and things like that. Like if you think about what your visibility plan is, there's going to be a lot of value there. Like companies don't have massive B2B budgets for that for no reason. Like those things work. And so I think it's very helpful to kind of like think through what your sort of like executive visibility plan is. And so I always kind of like advise, people coming out of college to try to do that, to meet as many people as possible, to get exposure, to write, to share, like to do those things, because you also then get practice for if it's an interview or whatever it might be. One, you have work product to show, but two, you might be more eloquent and comfortable in conversations. And for me, like that's great when I meet young people who, want to work on one of my teams or companies, whatever it is. Like everything is kind of like part of the interview process. How you reach out, how you follow up, what you're writing about and talking about on LinkedIn. How, like, I'd like to see, can you write well? Are you thinking critically? Like, are these like really good insights? Like, like, and I think people don't necessarily like, understand that, but it's, I think it's part of also bringing your full self to, to work and what you do. And, I also share a lot about my, like my family, and like my team knows about my kids and like all that, it's all kind of like, you have to, I think, kind of like do it in the right way and how you share. But there is, conveying who you are in a, in your full capacity, I think is just very important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, it's funny. Just thinking about some advice that I got from a former boss who spent a decade at Procter and Gamble, also a Michigan undergrad. He was very effusive on effective communication. Very effusive, not, just presenting in front of people, but anytime you open your mouth or anytime you write something, how can you be clear and concise without sacrificing completeness? And I'm like, really, doing one of these. And then he's like, look at all these CEOs and look where they, he was very proud. Look at all these CEOs on the Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies and look where they started. And a lot of them started as ABMs at Procter and Gamble. So there's, again, if that's the aspiration, of course, maybe one day, but really it's, boiling it down to very simple steps or processes. Again, effective communication, which can mean a lot of different things. But to your point, it's a very 360-degree approach to showing who you are to the world. Whether that's an event in the office, just having a casual conversation, a LinkedIn post, what have you. Again, it's all part of the that full picture that you want to bring. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was going to say it's like about like doing and showing, and even if it's through philanthropy or like in doing that sort of stuff, like it just it increases your what's it called, like your luck surface area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
So anyway, big. I completely agree.
Yes, and it's funny that not funny, but you mentioned some of the characteristics for quality you're looking for. The kind, smart, and passionate. You also something that I picked up from your LinkedIn profile. Speaking of LinkedIn, is critical thinking. Can you give us an example of how you push critical thinking within your teams, the teams now or the teams in the past?
Yeah, I am very vocal. Like, especially when if I start somewhere or roll something out that, things are iterative, that I value good questions, that I expect, feedback coming back my way. And that like we can have conversations and that like good ideas come from anywhere. And so like I try to create an environment that kind of like promotes that, like, don't just take things for what they are. And actually with, one of our most recent hires, at Female Quotient, I asked her, after her, her first 2 weeks to share back, like, to me, like a top line, like audit of the business based on like who she's like meeting, the processes that are rolled out and all these things. And, I tried to set that up in a way. It's like, you are here because you're great. Like, I trust you. We trust you. And new ways of thinking are just always encouraged. And so, we talk a lot about, like no pride in authorship and that nothing is precious. To encourage, like, if something can be done better, let's do it better. And I think that is the only way, like, especially when new people come in, there is there's a moment in time to capture opportunity to not like just take these interval steps of growth, and that you get people who can kind of like see what you're trying to do without being like, I mean, burdened is the wrong word, but without being like biased from the past of whatever it was. But like, otherwise you just kind of make these like, very linear improvements and modifications. But without, just like, constant kind of like critical thinking and new thinking, you can't make those like big jump steps. Because you're kind of clouded and again, like biased by like what has happened. And so, I think it's like a combination of how you onboard, new employees and the kind of like trust and the way in which you integrate them into the team. But I think it's also, really pushing the team to not just take things how they are. And to it's okay to question things. And especially if I say something and it's either unclear or you disagree, let's have a conversation about that, because I'm the first to admit that I am not going to be the smartest in the room, and I'm not going to be the best necessarily at any one thing. And so, just without that kind of safe environment where people feel really comfortable and confident to do it, it doesn't get done.
Right. No, I totally get that. And it's how you onboard, the examples, the demonstration. It's not just words, it's actually actions. In terms of that exercise for that most recent new hire, what was that output, if you're able to share?
Yeah, we walked through it. We walked through it today. It was a few slides where, it was her thoughts on gaps from different roles, perspectives, processes that we could be doing differently, some of which borrowed from her past experiences. And so it was kind of like a short deck where we just kind of went through and had conversations. And it was cool because some of the things I had been thinking about, and some things I was like, oh, that's really smart. I don't know why we haven't been doing that. But what's also very cool about, a small company, is that there was one process change. I was like, let's start that today. It's it makes a ton of sense. There's no red tape or anything like that. And it's a different way to do kind of brainstorming and how we collaborate with other teams. I was just like, yeah, cool. Let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. And that's amazing, because that also reinforces that trust component. Because it's not like she's not just going through the motions of giving you feedback. It's like, here's some based on my observations and based on personal or professional experience. This is what I recommend. This is what I suggest. And you took that and you took it and you ingested it, and you're like, you know what? This actually, let's implement this today. Again, it's not just words; it's actually actions. Where you are building that trust and that accountability and that transparency, which you aspire to with all the teams that you build and you lead, Jason. One of my last questions here is about the mission, about female quotient. You mentioned gender equality. What are some of the evidence both at a macro and micro scale on the impact that the female quotient is having on those conversations about gender equality?
It's a great question. So there are a few ways I can answer that. One is, and I can't share which company, but there is a company that we worked with in the past where we actually saw a meaningful increase in how they were able to close the pay equity gap at the company, which was great. And a lot of the ways that we're able to do that is by having conversations at the C-suite level, at the board level. We do executive advisory and board advisory work as well. And making sure that those conversations are happening with the people who can actually affect that change. And that's why, when we have at all the equality lounges, at a lot of our digital content, we're aiming to have very senior executives participate, because they are the ones that can impact how everyone is paid. They can also impact the way in which, the next generation and, more junior employees are able to get access to things that, current executives have. And we also launched, what's called Flipping Point 5 at Female Quotient, which is also kind of part of our advisory practice, where, of all of the sustainable development goals, I think there are 17 or 19. The fifth one is about, gender equality in the pay, in the pay gap. That is the only one of all of them that CEOs are able to impact and affect in their career or in their tenure. And so our focus is to, actually work with, really the Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies to actually look at their organizations and change it. In 5 years, instead of the 130 plus that the World Economic Forum estimates it will actually take to close the gap. Doing that in 130, 31 years or whatever it is at this point is just not okay. We don't accept that. It really just can be done a lot faster. We want that to happen, and we want to also work with executives and brands and companies that agree. And it seems more and more a lot are raising their hands. And we're excited to, actually do the work with them.
No, that's excellent. To have that impact and to, 131 years to close the pay gap, there definitely has to be, and you're having these conversations with the C-suite at some of these leading Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies on why it's important to close it now and not wait, is tremendous. And to show that impact on, again, what it means to closing that pay gap, the gender pay gap, and its impact on the American public, which is amazing. In terms of the listeners who want to learn more about you and the Female Quotient, Jason, where should they go?
Yeah, thefemalequotient.com is a great place to kind of see a lot of things, but the way in which most people engage with us is on LinkedIn and on Instagram. You can find us on both, and we are very, very active in communicating with our community and posting content. And then for the listeners who are heading to any major industry and business conferences, look out for Female Quotient and the Equality Lounge. All of our events are open to all, as inclusivity is very core to our DNA. And so we would love to host you at one of our lounges as well.
Excellent. So for the listeners, Jason, I really do appreciate all the time and the wisdom and the insights that you've dispensed, throughout your career. Again, I think there is a LinkedIn post, as I mentioned, in the offing, to help, connect the dots and really visualize, your journey, professionally, which I think, as you mentioned, will provide value for the folks who are going to see it, who are going through those same sort of thoughts, whether it's coming out of college or growing within their career, of, how you can, again, progress and evolve over time, which I think is really tremendous. So what I'm also going to do is include links, yes, the Female Quotient's website, but also where to follow them on social media, Jason on social media. It sounds like, Jason, you're open to folks reaching out to you on LinkedIn if they have any questions, thoughts. Yeah. There you have it. Well, Jason, it's been a true pleasure, and we will talk soon.
Eric, I can't wait, and thank you again for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining this episode of the Worthy for 30 podcast. Stay tuned for more insights from impactful business leaders. Don't miss out. Follow us on all podcast platforms to catch every conversation.